The Xylotha city stood like a monument of cold steel and twisted metal, gleaming under the dim light of a dying sun. The alien world was nothing like Earth. Its vast expanse was filled with jagged mountains, endless red deserts, and skies that seemed permanently clouded with a deep, unnatural haze. Everything about the Xylotha's home was dark, alien, and unforgiving. In the middle of a desolate square, a human figure knelt on the hard, cracked ground. Dr. Sarah Hayes, a scientist from Earth, stared into the void, her once bright eyes now shadowed with resignation. Her arms were bound to the cold, unforgiving stone, her head held high despite the circumstances. She had known this day would come. She had prepared for it. But even now, as the alien crowd gathered to witness her execution, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something else was in play, something much bigger than her or even the Xyloth. The air buzzed with anticipation. Around her, the Xyloth leaders stood tall in their dark robes, their insect-like eyes gleaming as they watched her. The aliens had no compassion, no mercy, but there was something oddly respectful in the way they watched her, like they were waiting for the final act of a performance. Sarah had learned long ago that the Xyloth had no concept of human emotions. To them, she was just another specimen, another tool in a game they'd already won. But Sarah wasn't ready to give up just yet. She had one final card to play. The humans had always underestimated Earth, and now it was time for the Xyloth to understand why that was a mistake. A sharp, eerie voice echoed through the square. It was Xalrak, the highest-ranking Xyloth general. His body shimmered with an ethereal glow, the bioluminescent markings on his skin flickering in the darkness like stars. Dr. Sarah Hayes, he began, his voice as cold as the stone beneath her knees, you have been found guilty of crimes against the Xyloth Empire. Your death will be an example to your pitiful species. Sarah's lips curled into a small, defiant smile. The Xyloth might have had the power to execute her, but they couldn't control what was happening next. She closed her eyes, and a single word passed her lips, almost a whisper, activate. For a moment, nothing happened. The Xyloth waited in confused silence, unsure of what to make of her last words. Xalrak stepped forward, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. What is this, human? He demanded. You think you can? Then the ground shook. At first, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. But then the tremors grew stronger, and the air itself seemed to ripple. The Xyloth froze, their antennae twitching as they tried to comprehend what was happening. The sky above darkened in an instant, clouds swirling into a vortex. The very fabric of space seemed to distort. A blinding light flashed from Sarah's wrist. It wasn't from any device she carried, this came from within her. A hidden technology. Buried deep within her, activated. The Xyloth watched in awe and confusion as Sarah's body glowed with a fierce energy, her surroundings warping with every passing second. Xalrak's voice rose in alarm. What have you done, human? Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Earth's response had begun. Far across the galaxy, on a forgotten space station, an ancient communication array buzzed to life. A signal, undetectable by the Xyloth, blazed through the stars. It was the signal Earth had hidden away for centuries, an emergency protocol for the moment just like this. The Xyloth had no idea how much they had underestimated humanity. The sky over the alien world cracked, as if reality itself was tearing apart. A deep rumble filled the air, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Xalrak's eyes widened in horror. What is this? Impossible, another alien leader muttered. We never knew Earth had this kind of power. In a flash, the atmosphere around Sarah seemed to twist, rippling with intense energy. The Xyloth scattered, afraid of the unknown force that was now gripping their world. But even they could sense it, the overwhelming might of something beyond their comprehension. Sarah's body was now enveloped in a sphere of glowing energy. The ground around her cracked open, sending jagged rocks and debris flying into the air. The Xyloth recoiled, their limbs instinctively moving away from the chaos. Their once confident, menacing posture faltered as they realized that they were not in control anymore. In a heartbeat, the energy that had surrounded Sarah shot up into the sky, creating a burst of light so bright it seemed to swallow the heavens whole. And then, it happened. The stars themselves flickered. The time-space continuum warped. Across the galaxy, every alien race, every empire that had once thought humanity weak, now felt the pulse of Earth's vengeance. The Xyloth, arrogant in their rule, were now being forced to confront an enemy unlike any they had ever known. The light faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving a trail of cosmic energy that stretched across the galaxy. The Xyloth leaders stood in stunned silence, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what had just transpired. Zalrak, now more agitated than ever, turned to his generals. "Prepare for battle," he ordered, his voice low and dangerous. "Earth's response has begun. We must find out what this is, before it's too late." Back on Earth, things were no better. Dr. Sarah Hayes' death had sent shockwaves through the planet. News of her execution spread quickly, but it wasn't the death itself that rattled humanity to its core. It was the strange, unexplained energy surge that had emanated from Sarah at the moment of her death. Scientists, military leaders, and world governments scrambled for answers, but no one had any idea what had really happened. Sarah had been part of a secret project, an initiative so classified that only a handful of people knew it existed. It had been her life's work, a project that, unbeknownst to the world, had been preparing for this very moment. Earth had been ready. Sarah had been ready. And now, Earth was responding. The world was on edge. There was no telling how the Xyloth would react. The communication channels between Earth's leaders and their allies were flooded with messages. Everyone wanted answers, but no one had any. On a quiet, secure military base in the Nevada desert, Colonel Jacob Stark stared at the flickering monitor in front of him. A map of the galaxy, marked with coordinates and classified data, glowed on the screen. He had been part of the project, just like Sarah. He knew the stakes. But even he couldn't fathom the consequences of what had just occurred. "We've never seen anything like this," Stark muttered, running a hand through his short, graying hair. "What the hell did she trigger?" A voice from behind him interrupted his thoughts. "We're getting reports from our allies in the Galactic Federation," Lieutenant Mara Sullivan said, her voice tight with concern. "It's bad, Colonel. The Xyloth are already preparing their forces. They know something's coming, and they're not taking chances." Stark's eyes hardened. "They're not going to get away with this." Back on the alien planet, the Xyloth were no longer just concerned. They were terrified. The message from Earth was clear. This was just the beginning. As the alien leaders confer in panic, they receive a new transmission from deep within Earth's solar system. A massive fleet of unknown ships is emerging from the void, heading straight for their planet. The galaxy holds its breath. The war between Earth and the Xyloth is about to begin. The Earth's response to Sarah Hayes' execution rippled through the galaxy like an unseen tide, shaking the very foundation of intergalactic politics. Across countless star systems, the Xyloth were scrambling to understand what had just happened. Their initial panic gave way to determination, but their enemies were not confined to their home planet. Earth had done something extraordinary, something that defied their understanding of power, and that terrified them. Back on Earth, however, the public didn't know what had really transpired. All they knew was that Dr. Sarah Hayes was dead. But that wasn't the whole story. In the aftermath, Earth's governments went into emergency mode. The world had united under a banner of shock and disbelief, but behind closed doors, a secret war was already beginning. There was no announcement, no rallying cries from the media. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Inside a darkened war room buried beneath the Nevada desert, Colonel Jacob Stark sat in silence, his eyes locked onto a series of blinking lights on the massive holographic map of the galaxy. The map flickered as updates poured in from deep space, each one more concerning than the last. He leaned forward, rubbing his temples. His mind raced, but his gut churned with a feeling he couldn't quite place. "What are we looking at?" he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else in the room. Lieutenant Mara Sullivan stood beside him, eyes scanning the data on her own console. "We're not sure, sir," she replied, her voice laced with uncertainty. "The Xyloth have mobilized faster than we anticipated. They're gathering forces in sectors 4, 6, and 11. And there's something else, it's the signal." Stark's brow furrowed. "The signal? What about it?" "It's changing," she said. "We don't know why, but the frequency is fluctuating. It's almost as if the artifact has evolved. We need to know what it means. Fast." Stark's mind flashed back to the artifact Sarah had been studying before her death. That ancient relic had been central to the project they'd been working on in secret for years. It was said to be of alien origin, but its true purpose remained unclear. All they knew was that it had activated when Sarah died, sending out a signal that rippled through space. It was as if the Earth itself had awoken, answering the challenge of the Xyloth with a force they couldn't yet comprehend. "We'll need to get our hands on that artifact," Stark said firmly. "Get a team ready. I don't care what it takes, Mara. We need answers." Mara hesitated, then nodded. "Understood, sir." Meanwhile, in a different part of the world, at a military base in Washington, D.C., President Eleanor Matthews sat alone in a secure briefing room. The door had been locked for hours, and her face, usually composed and confident, now showed signs of wear. The information flowing in had been overwhelming, but one thing was clear: Earth was under attack, even if the enemy hadn't yet shown their full hand. She'd been briefed on the situation, but there were still too many unknowns. What had happened to Sarah? Why had Earth's response been so powerful? And how did the Xyloth know to strike so swiftly after her death? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She straightened immediately, wiping away any signs of fatigue. "Come in." General Paul Fisher entered, his face grim. "Madam President, we have confirmation. The Xyloth are sending ships. They're targeting Earth's outer defenses first. But there's something strange." Matthews raised an eyebrow. "Strange how?" "They're not attacking with full force. They're testing our systems, probing us," Fisher explained. "They're trying to learn our weaknesses before they strike hard." Matthews folded her hands in front of her, her gaze hardening. "They won't find one," she said, her voice steely. "Prepare the military. We'll need to hold them off long enough to figure out what this is really about." General Fisher nodded, but before he could turn to leave, Matthews spoke again, her tone more reflective this time. "There's something bigger at play here, isn't there?" Fisher paused. "I don't know, ma'am. But I think we're about to find out." Back at the Nevada base, the situation was growing dire. As Colonel Stark's team prepared to retrieve the artifact, strange things began happening. At first, it was subtle, a power surge that flickered through the facility, followed by a series of communications failures. But as the minutes ticked by, the anomalies became harder to ignore. "Something's wrong," Stark muttered, staring at his console. The data was being corrupted in real time. Flashes of garbled symbols and scrambled frequencies replaced the information they had been receiving. "Mara, what's happening?" "I don't know," Mara replied, her hands flying across the keyboard. "It's as if someone's hacking into our systems, or maybe, wait." She paused, her eyes widening in disbelief. "This can't be right." Stark stepped forward. "What is it?" "It's a signal," Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The artifact, it's sending a signal. And it's coming from inside our base." The realization hit Stark like a freight train. The artifact, buried deep within their facility, had just begun to send out a signal, one they couldn't decipher. He'd always suspected that the relic was more than just a passive tool, it was a key. But what exactly it was unlocking remained a mystery. Before he could process the implications, an urgent alarm blared across the room. Stark's heart raced as he glanced at the security feed. "There's movement in Sector 9, a voice crackled over the intercom. "We've detected an intruder." Stark's mind raced. "Mara, get a team to Sector 9. Now." But as she moved to grab the necessary gear, the power surged again. The lights flickered, casting shadows that seemed to pulse and shift unnaturally. Suddenly, the ground shook. Stark was thrown to the ground as the base trembled violently, a deep rumbling coming from the depths of the earth itself. A wave of energy surged through the facility, and for a brief, horrifying moment, everything went silent. Then the walls began to crack. Mara's voice cracked over the comms. "We've lost power in several sectors, Colonel. The damage is severe. Some things." Before she could finish, the ground beneath them ruptured. Massive, jagged rocks burst from the floor, and the room was plunged into chaos. Stark barely had time to react before the entire section of the base collapsed in on itself, debris raining down from above. "Get out! Get out now!" Stark shouted, pulling Mara to her feet as they scrambled toward the nearest exit. But the tremors were only growing stronger. Outside, the sky was alight with strange, erratic flashes. The same energy that had been triggered by Sarah Hayes' death seemed to be warping reality itself, distorting spacetime in ways that defied reason. Stark knew they were only scratching the surface of something far bigger, but the events unfolding now were beyond their control. Meanwhile, back at the heart of the Xyloth Empire, Zalrak and his council stood in the command chamber of their warship, watching as Earth's response continued to unfold across their sensors. "This is impossible," Zalrak growled, his multiple eyes narrowing as he studied the data. "The human signal, what is it?" "It's not just a signal, my lord," one of his generals said, his voice shaking with fear. "It's a weapon. A weapon capable of affecting time and space. And it's coming for us." Zalrak clenched his fists. "We were fools. We underestimated them." The general nodded. "What should we do?" Zalrak's mandibles clicked together in thought. "Prepare for the worst," he said, his voice low and filled with a dark certainty. "We cannot allow this weapon to reach us. Earth has already proven its resolve." Back on Earth, Colonel Stark's team had escaped the collapsing facility, but they were no closer to understanding the full scope of what had happened. They had learned one thing, though: the Earth was no longer the prey. It had become the hunter. The Xyloth would soon learn the true power of humanity. And they would come to understand that Earth's revenge had only just begun. As the team regroups, they learn of a new, terrifying development. The artifact, once thought to be a mere relic, is revealed to be the key to an even greater weapon, one capable of reshaping the very fabric of the universe. But as they dig deeper, they realize someone is already ahead of them, a shadowy figure, manipulating events from behind the scenes. The war is only beginning, and Earth is about to face an enemy far worse than the Xyloth. The rubble from the collapsed base was still settling when Colonel Stark's team made their way into the underground tunnels, their footsteps echoing through the narrow, dimly lit corridors. Outside, the chaos was only just beginning. The ground trembled with each tremor that shook the very foundation of Earth's defenses. But Stark's mind wasn't on the destruction around him. It was on what they had just uncovered, an enemy, hidden in plain sight, manipulating everything from the shadows. "Mara, status report?" Stark called over his communicator, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. "We're clear for now, Colonel," Mara Sullivan replied, her voice crackling slightly through the static. "But the tunnels are unstable. We need to get to the surface, or we'll be buried alive." "Agreed." "Let's move," Stark commanded, his voice firm. The team of soldiers moved quickly, their footsteps muffled by the collapsing base above them. The moment they had witnessed earlier, when the very ground had cracked open, releasing raw energy, still lingered in Stark's mind. The artifact, the relic they had been trying to study for so long, was now sending signals that even the most advanced technology couldn't trace. It had triggered a chain of events that not even Earth's most powerful military leaders could have foreseen. But there was something worse looming. Something darker than they could comprehend. Back in Washington, D.C., President Eleanor Matthews sat in a high-security war room, far from the chaos of the Nevada base. Her hands were folded on the table, her face illuminated by the holographic screen surrounding her. She had been briefed on the situation, on the attacks from the Xyloth, on the mysterious energy surge that seemed to have come from nowhere. But what she was hearing now made her blood run cold. "Are you telling me that the artifact, Sarah Hayes' project, isn't just a relic?" Matthews asked, her voice rising in disbelief. "It's an active weapon?" General Paul Fisher nodded grimly. "Yes, ma'am. We believe it's capable of manipulating space-time. And as of now, we have no idea what else it can do." Matthews stood, her posture rigid as she paced the small room. "Then why the hell didn't we know this sooner? How are we just learning about this now?" "We didn't know what we were dealing with, ma'am," Fisher replied. "Sarah Hayes had kept the full scope of the project hidden, even from us. She must have known something we didn't." Matthews stopped in her tracks, her eyes narrowing. "But why? Why keep it a secret? And why now? Why is it reacting only after her death?" "That's the part we still don't understand," Fisher said, his voice low. "But I have a theory." Matthews raised an eyebrow. "What's your theory?" Fisher hesitated before answering. "What if Sarah didn't die by accident? What if her death was part of something bigger? Something someone didn't want us to uncover?" Matthews felt a chill run down her spine. "You're suggesting that someone on Earth, someone in our own government, is behind this?" Fisher's gaze hardened. "I'm not saying that, but I'm not ruling it out either. There's too much we don't know." On the surface of the Nevada base, the sky was thick with smoke and dust. Stark's team had made it to the outside, but the air was thick with tension. The tremors that had rocked the facility were now being felt in cities across the country. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift and tremble as if the earth itself was responding to something far deeper than the current conflict. "Colonel, we need to get to higher ground," Mara said, her voice urgent. "If the Xyloth are already sending ships, we won't survive unless we can establish a stronger defense." Stark nodded grimly. "We're not just fighting the Xyloth, Mara. We're fighting something else. Something that's manipulating us." He turned to the rest of the team. "Move out. We head for the extraction point. Now." As they moved quickly through the wreckage of the base, Stark couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was pulling the strings. The Xyloth, though dangerous, were not the real enemy. There was something darker. There was something darker, more insidious at play, an invisible force that had orchestrated the events leading to this moment. Meanwhile, far from Earth, aboard a massive Xyloth warship, Zalrak stood at the helm, his multifaceted eyes scanning the data streaming in from across the galaxy. His warship, a towering fortress in space, was preparing to engage Earth. But as he analyzed the data, a sudden realization gripped him. "The humans have activated something," he muttered under his breath, his mandibles twitching with agitation. "Something we cannot control. The signal, it's not just a weapon. It's a force." One of his generals stepped forward, her voice trembling. "What do we do, my lord? If they have this kind of power?" Zalrak's eyes narrowed. "We do what we must. The humans must be crushed. But we need to know who, or what, is behind this power. If there is something greater than Earth, we need to understand it." He turned to face his fleet. Prepare the ships. We head to Earth. Now. Back on Earth, the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but there was still much to uncover. Stark and his team had reached the extraction point, but even as they gathered their bearings, they were met with something unexpected. A signal from deep space, had just been received. "Colonel, you need to see this," Mara said, her voice shaking with urgency. "It's coming from the artifact." Stark stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. On the screen before him, a strange series of symbols blinked in and out. They were nothing like anything he had ever seen. It wasn't just a random code, it was something purposeful. But the meaning was just out of reach. "Can we decode it?" Stark asked. I don't know, sir," Mara replied, her voice filled with frustration. "But whoever sent this, they know exactly what they're doing. This isn't a message. It's a warning." Stark clenched his fists. A warning for who? Before Mara could respond, the ground shook again. This time, it wasn't just a tremor, it was a full-blown earthquake, unlike anything Earth had ever experienced. The air vibrated with raw power, and the sky above them crackled with strange energy. The war had already begun. In the chaos that followed, Stark's team moved quickly, following orders as they tried to make their way to safety. But Stark couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The Xyloth weren't the only threat Earth faced. There was something else, something hidden in the shadows. As they reached a safe zone, Stark turned to Mara. "We need to find out who sent that message. And we need to find out why." Mara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Colonel. I promise." The Xyloth were closing in, their fleet growing ever larger. But as they neared Earth's atmosphere, they received another transmission, one that made their blood run cold. It was a signal, but not from Earth. It was from an unknown source, one they had never encountered before. A new player had entered the game. Zalrak growled low in his throat. "The humans have allies." But who? The answer, though still unknown, was already approaching. As the transmission continues, the message finally decodes. It's a warning, but not just to Earth or the Xyloth. It's a message to anyone who dares challenge the true power that lies behind the veil. A shadowy figure, watching everything unfold, speaks directly to Zalrak, and to Earth. The war has only just begun, and Earth is about to face a force more ancient and powerful than anything it has ever known. The Xyloth fleet loomed just beyond the reach of Earth's atmosphere, their massive warships casting a shadow over the planet. But beneath the surface, in the heart of Earth's defense operations, Colonel Stark was beginning to feel the weight of the situation more than ever before. The signal from the mysterious source had rattled him. It was a warning, but one that wasn't just for the Xyloth. It was for everyone. Stark and his team stood in the command center of the newly established operations base, their eyes locked on the massive holographic map in front of them. The Earth's defenses were already spread thin, and with each passing minute, the situation grew more precarious. "Colonel, the Xyloth fleet is advancing," Mara said, her voice tight with stress as she tapped rapidly on her console. "They've bypassed our outer defenses. We need to act fast or they'll breach the planet's atmosphere." Stark didn't respond right away. His mind was elsewhere, on the mysterious transmission they had intercepted. The message from the unknown source was still repeating in his mind, the chilling words echoing through his thoughts. "The time has come, and all will be revealed. Beware the true power that rises from the shadows." Who had sent that message? What did it mean? And why was it being directed at both Earth and the Xyloth? "Colonel?" Mara's voice cut through his thoughts. Stark shook his head, snapping back to the present. "What's our status on the artifact?" "We've managed to isolate the signal," Mara said, her hands moving swiftly over her console. "But it's not much help. We're still working on decrypting the message. Whoever sent it is far more advanced than we could have imagined. Stark's jaw tightened. So, we're essentially blind? For now, Mara replied. But we're not out of options. We can still make a move if we act quickly. Stark didn't have time to waste. Do it. Whatever it takes, we need to understand that signal before it's too late. As Mara worked, Stark turned to the rest of the team, his eyes scanning the faces of his soldiers. They were exhausted, but the urgency of the situation was clear in their eyes. They had already faced impossible odds, and now, with the Xyloth closing in, they were about to face something much worse. I need you all to stay sharp, Stark said, his voice carrying across the room. This isn't just about surviving anymore. We're fighting for something much bigger than that. The Xyloth are dangerous, but they're not the only threat out there. He let those words sink in, knowing that what they were about to face could change everything. In space, the Xyloth fleet continued its advance toward Earth, its warships now in range of the planet's outer defense systems. Zalrak, the Xyloth commander, paced back and forth in the warship's command center, his mandibles twitching with frustration. Why are we being held back? He growled, turning to his subordinate, a nervous officer at his side. We have the humans cornered. Their defenses are crumbling. The officer swallowed hard before answering. My lord, the Earth is not reacting as we expected. Their defenses are adaptive. It's as though they're anticipating our moves. Zalrak narrowed his eyes. Anticipating us? Impossible. We've had centuries to learn their strategies. How could they possibly have developed such a countermeasure so quickly? Their systems are strange, my lord, the officer said, his voice trembling. It's almost as if their technology is being guided by something beyond their understanding. Zalrak's eyes flared with anger. You're telling me we're up against a force we don't understand? The officer nodded. Yes, my lord. And there's something else. We've detected unusual energy signatures coming from the planet's surface. They don't match anything we've encountered before. We believe it's connected to the artifact. At the mention of the artifact, Zalrak's expression shifted. His many eyes focused intently on the officer. The artifact. If it's active, then the humans may have unlocked something far more dangerous than we anticipated, the officer finished. Zalrak's mind raced. He knew the artifact's potential, but he hadn't anticipated it being activated so soon. The humans were playing a dangerous game. And now, the Xyloth were on the verge of discovering just how powerful Earth's response could be. Back on Earth, the situation was growing increasingly dire. The Xyloth were advancing, and Stark's team had no time to waste. But as they continued to decode the mysterious signal, a breakthrough came unexpectedly. Mara suddenly stood up, her eyes wide with excitement. Colonel, we've got it. Stark's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What have you found? Mara moved swiftly to the main console, her fingers dancing across the keys. The image that appeared on the screen was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It was a map of the galaxy, but unlike anything they had seen before. The map wasn't static, it was alive, pulsing with energy. It's a network, Mara explained, her voice filled with wonder. A network of unknown origin. It connects countless star systems. But there's something strange, this network seems to be evolving. Stark frowned. Evolving? What does that mean? It means the signal we intercepted isn't just a warning, Mara said, her voice low. It's an invitation. An invitation? Stark's mind raced, but he quickly dismissed the thought. There was no time to speculate. Where is it coming from? Mara hesitated, looking at the map with a mixture of awe and fear. The source, it's not on any of the known star charts. It's in a remote part of the galaxy, beyond any reach we currently have. But if we follow the signal, we might be able to uncover more about the true power behind this force. Stark considered her words for a moment. We don't have the luxury of time. The Xyloth are already on their way. We need to defend Earth now. Mara shook her head. Colonel, if we don't understand what's behind this signal, we're fighting a battle we don't fully comprehend. We need to know who, or what, is behind this before we face the Xyloth. Or we might lose everything. Stark stared at the map for a long moment, torn between the urgency of defending Earth and the need to uncover the truth behind the mysterious signal. The decision was harder than it had ever been before. I'm not letting Earth fall, he said finally, his voice firm. But we can't fight blind. We'll follow the signal. We need to find out who's behind this before it's too late. Elsewhere, high in the mountains of Colorado, an old, forgotten facility hummed with activity. Deep within the Earth, hidden from the prying eyes of both the Xyloth and Earth's military, a figure stood at the heart of the control room, his fingers dancing across the holographic console in front of him. The figure, dressed in a black uniform, paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the data that poured in from multiple sources. The room was dark, save for the flickering light from the screen. The man, known only as the Architect, had been waiting for this moment. The moment when the signal would activate, and the true nature of his plan would be revealed. He had been watching, waiting, and manipulating from the shadows. And now, the time had come. The Architect pressed a final key, sending a pulse of energy through the facility. The signal that had been haunting both Earth and the Xyloth now resonated across the galaxy with a power no one could ignore. Let the games begin, he muttered, a sinister smile creeping across his face. As the Xyloth prepare to strike, and Stark's team sets out to uncover the true nature of the signal, Earth's fate hangs in the balance. But behind the scenes, an unseen force moves ever closer to revealing its power. The Architect is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. And as his plans unfold, the galaxy will never be the same. The world was on the brink of collapse. Stark's heart pounded in his chest as he stood in the command center of Earth's military operations base, his eyes fixed on the holographic map before him. The Xyloth fleet, massive and menacing, loomed on the edge of the planet's atmosphere, their presence a reminder of just how fragile humanity's position truly was. The artifact, that mysterious relic from another age, had activated, and in doing so, it had unlocked something far beyond their understanding. Colonel, we're running out of time, Mara's voice broke through his thoughts. The Xyloth are on a direct collision course with Earth. If we don't act soon, it's game over. Stark's mind raced. They had learned so much over the past few days, yet there were still so many questions left unanswered. The signal from the unknown source, the strange network that seemed to stretch across the galaxy, and the terrifying power that now seemed to be awakening. They were no closer to understanding what was happening, but one thing was painfully clear: they needed to act fast. Is the signal still active? Stark asked, his eyes never leaving the map as he processed the information. Mara nodded, her face tense. Yes, Colonel. We're still trying to decode it, but it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. The signal keeps shifting, adapting. It's almost as if it's alive. Stark clenched his fists, trying to shake off the feeling of dread gnawing at his gut. Every instinct told him that they were running out of time, but even more unsettling was the fact that they had no idea who or what was truly behind the signal. Whoever, or whatever, it was, had to be stopped. Not just for Earth's survival, but for the survival of the entire galaxy. We need to get a team to that facility, Stark said abruptly. The one where the signal originated. You think the answer is there? Mara asked, raising an eyebrow. I don't know, Stark admitted, but I'm betting it's our best shot. If we can't figure out what's driving this, we'll never survive the Xyloth. Far above Earth, in the cold emptiness of space, the Xyloth fleet was preparing for its assault. Zalrak, the fleet commander, stood in the warship's command center, his many eyes scanning the readouts before him. His thoughts were dark, filled with a mixture of frustration and anticipation. The humans are more resilient than we anticipated, Zalrak muttered, his voice low but laced with venom. But they will fall. They always fall. At his side, his second-in-command, General Varnock, waited silently. The fleet was ready. But something about this mission felt different. There was an uncertainty in the air, an ominous undercurrent that even the Xyloth couldn't ignore. "My lord," Varnock began, his voice cautious. "The artifact. It's no longer responding to our attempts to intercept its signal. Something has changed." Zalrak's mandibles clicked in frustration. "The artifact has been activated, yes. But the humans have no idea what they're dealing with. Once we breach their defenses, we'll have access to whatever power lies within it. That's what matters." He turned his gaze toward Earth, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. "Prepare the fleet. We strike at dawn." Back on Earth, the tension was palpable. Stark and his team had gathered in the operations center, preparing for the most dangerous mission of their lives. They would infiltrate the facility where the signal had originated, hoping to find answers before it was too late. "Colonel, we've got an issue," Mara said, her voice tight with urgency. "The Xyloth fleet has entered our atmosphere. They're getting close." Stark turned sharply toward her. "I thought we had more time. Why didn't we detect them earlier?" Mara's fingers flew over the console, her eyes scanning the data. "They've adapted. We couldn't pick them up until they were practically on top of us. Their technology, it's evolving too quickly for us to keep up." Stark's mind raced. The situation was rapidly slipping out of control. If they couldn't stop the Xyloth from reaching Earth's surface, humanity would be finished. But even more pressing was the need to uncover the truth about the signal, the force that was pulling the strings from the shadows. "We're not backing down," Stark said, his voice resolute. "We're going to that facility. We have to find out who or what is behind this, and we need to do it now." The journey to the hidden facility took Stark and his team across rugged terrain, deep into the heart of an isolated mountain range. The location had been kept a secret for years, and even now, it was buried beneath layers of government red tape and military secrecy. The facility, built into the side of a mountain, had been abandoned for decades. But the signals coming from it had reactivated, and with them, the hope that they might uncover the truth. As they approached the facility's entrance, Stark signaled for the team to stop. The air around them was unnaturally still, a tense silence hanging over the group. "Something's not right," Stark said, his voice low. Mara nodded. "It's too quiet. There should be activity here." They moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the dense foliage surrounding the entrance. As they descended into the underground complex, the temperature dropped, and a strange hum filled the air, growing louder with each step. "Stay alert," Stark ordered, his voice sharp. "We don't know what we're walking into." The facility was like a labyrinth. The walls were lined with strange, glowing symbols that seemed to pulse with an energy that sent shivers down Stark's spine. It was as if the place itself were alive, responding to their presence. "We're getting close," Mara said, her eyes scanning the symbols. "The signal is coming from deeper inside." As they ventured further, Stark couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional creak of the facility's old metal framework. They reached a massive chamber, its walls lined with strange devices that hummed with energy. "Is this the source?" Stark asked, turning to Mara. She nodded slowly, her face pale. "It has to be. But there's something off about all this." Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the air grew heavy with a strange energy. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the chamber. "Welcome, humans. You have come to seek answers. But answers come at a cost." Stark's breath caught in his throat. "Who are you?" The voice responded with chilling clarity. I am the architect. And you are standing at the threshold of your destruction. The voice of the architect reverberated through the chamber, sending waves of unease through Stark and his team. The truth they had sought was now within reach, but at what cost? And what was the architect's true plan? The clock was ticking, and the fate of Earth, and the galaxy, hung in the balance. The chamber was a cold, cavernous place, its walls lined with the glowing symbols of an ancient civilization. Every step that Stark and his team took echoed through the silence, and their breaths felt like loud disruptions against the overwhelming stillness. In the midst of it all, the voice of the architect resonated, deep and unnerving. I am the architect, it said, its tone filled with an eerie calmness. And you stand before the final moment of your species' existence. You have come far, but you are not prepared for what lies ahead. Stark's eyes narrowed as he scanned the chamber, trying to locate the source of the voice. It didn't seem to be coming from any specific direction. The voice was everywhere, reverberating through the very fabric of the space. It felt as though the entire facility was alive, listening to their every movement. We didn't come here to die, Stark said, his voice steady despite the growing unease inside him. We came for answers. And answers you shall have, the architect replied, its voice no less menacing. But not the ones you seek. Stark's gut twisted. He wasn't sure what the architect meant by that, but he could feel the weight of its words. They were far from ready for whatever this was. They had barely begun to comprehend the scale of the forces at play, and now they were standing at the edge of a precipice, uncertain whether stepping forward would lead to their survival, or their annihilation. Mara was already scanning the room, her eyes darting over the strange, pulsating devices that lined the walls. Colonel, she said quietly, these machines, they're connected to the signal. They're amplifying it somehow. Stark didn't need to look closely to see the truth in her words. The symbols on the walls flickered with energy, and the hum that had filled the air seemed to grow louder, vibrating deep in their bones. Every instinct told him that the signal wasn't just an alien communication, it was a mechanism, a tool that had been activated for a reason. I don't understand, Mara continued. How is this possible? These symbols, they predate everything we know. This isn't just Xyloth technology. No, Stark said, his voice hardening. This is something else. This is something older. Before Mara could respond, the voice of the architect spoke again, its tone almost amused. Yes, you are right, Colonel Stark. This is not the work of the Xyloth. The Xyloth are but children, playing in the ruins of what once was. Stark's blood ran cold. The architect's words were laced with an unsettling certainty. There was no mistaking the sense of finality in its voice. Whatever this being was, it didn't fear the Xyloth. It wasn't concerned with the fate of a single species. It was something far more ancient, something that had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations across the cosmos. What are you? Stark demanded. What is this place? The architect's response was both chilling and enlightening. I am the keeper of all knowledge. I am the force that binds the universe together, the one who shapes the very fabric of existence. This place is the cradle of the universe, the birthplace of all that has ever been and all that will ever be. Stark felt the weight of those words. He glanced around at his team, who were equally stunned by the enormity of the revelation. And the signal? Mara asked, her voice trembling slightly. What is its purpose? The signal, the architect replied, was not meant for you. It was meant for them. Them? Stark echoed. Who are you talking about? The Xyloth, the architect's voice reverberated with a strange resonance, as if it were somehow woven into the very fabric of time itself. The Xyloth were once the protectors of this galaxy, but they failed. They turned away from their true purpose. And now, they are nothing more than shadows of their former selves. Stark's mind raced as he tried to process what he was hearing. The Xyloth, one of the most advanced and ruthless species in the galaxy, had once been protectors? That made no sense. They were invaders, conquerors. What was the architect saying? You're saying the Xyloth were guardians? Stark asked, still unable to fully grasp the enormity of the architect's words. The Xyloth's purpose was never to destroy. They were meant to preserve balance. But they failed, as all things eventually do. And in their failure, they awakened something that they could not control. Stark's pulse quickened. What did they awaken? The architect's silence was deafening, as if it were measuring the weight of the question. Then, finally, it spoke again, its voice almost a whisper. I awakened. The words hit Stark like a slap to the face. You? What do you mean, you? I am the architect, the voice echoed again, now carrying an air of finality. I am the force that guides the balance of the universe. I created the Xyloth to be the stewards of life, but they failed in their task. The signal you intercepted was not a message, but a warning. A warning of what is to come. What's coming? Mara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The architect's response was cryptic. The end. The end of this galaxy, the end of all galaxies. The Xyloth have triggered a chain of events that cannot be undone. The forces they have disturbed will destroy everything. Stark clenched his fists. We have to stop it. We have to stop whatever it is before it's too late. The architect's laugh was hollow, devoid of humor. It is already too late. You cannot stop what has already begun. The universe is in motion, and you are merely a part of its design. What you do now will not change its course. The end is inevitable. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the architect's words hung in the air, suffocating them. Stark had always believed in the possibility of survival, that there was always a way to turn the tide. But this felt different. This was an overwhelming force, a power so ancient and vast that no human, no matter how strong or determined, could possibly hope to stand against it. And yet, Stark couldn't give up. He couldn't accept that the end was inevitable. Not yet. We may not be able to stop it, Stark said, his voice low but filled with defiance. But we can damn well try. As Stark and his team stood in the heart of the chamber, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The lights flickered and dimmed, and the hum of the devices grew louder, almost deafening. Then, with a deafening crack, the floor split open. A bright, blinding light filled the room, and from the depths of the Earth's crust, something began to rise, a colossal figure, its form cloaked in shadows. It was ancient. It was alive. And it was the key to the architect's prophecy.